The travel ban will be cannon fodder to the recruiters. It's the worst thing we could do. But we do need to do, and we do, extraordinary screening, but a great deal more effort has to go into the building of community, the reaching out and working with these entities, with these sectors of society, so that there is not as significant a gap as there is in many parts of the world, by the way, not just in Britain.
We are back with breaking news coverage of the deadly terrorist attack in London, which left 7 dead and 48 injured. That was former Secretary of State John Kerry this morning, offering his condolences and what he thinks the focus should be in the fight against terrorism. Dino Vidal is back with me, and joining me now, former State Department spokesperson Nayyera Haq, former CIA Special Agent Jack Rice, and former Pentagon official Rosa Brooks. And so let's just go around and talk to each of you. Nayyera, I'll start with you. We just heard from John Kerry talking about what works and what doesn't work. Let's also have John Kerry, one more clip of him, and he was also on Meet the Press speaking about Muslims in the United Kingdom. Take a listen.
They've had a long-standing problem with respect to greater levels of alienation, a harder time assimilating into the broader British society, a lack of similar opportunity. So there are a lot of ingredients, and I'm going to leave it to her and to them to sort that out, particularly 5 days before an election.
And Nayyera, by her, he meant Theresa May, who is the Prime Minister, who is looking to be reelected. Chris Dickey earlier, in an earlier hour, was saying that part of the challenge for Ms. May is that she was the Home Secretary prior to being Prime Minister, meaning she was in charge of law and order and security. So a lot of this sort of lands at her doorstep. How do you suppose that these 3 successive attacks might impact the response of the British government, and could it impact that election?
Well, there's certainly the political response, and that is the maintaining elections, maintaining law and order. As you see, that there have been calls potentially to suspend the elections in London, and I'm glad to see that Theresa May has come out strongly that these democratic institutions need to continue, particularly at a time in which terrorists are trying to undermine democracy with their actions. That's the political side of this. There's also the social side, in which she mentioned the intolerance for extremism, that has become a challenge in British communities, particularly in the ghettoization of immigrant Muslims, because there's a Labour Party vote that they've been able to access by having, go-to imam who will then turn out thousands of voters for them. But within that, you've also found Saudi influence of it's a very extremist interpretation of Islam. It has been allowed to invade the thinking of other Muslim communities, and that's going to be a challenge, particularly for the United States, as Donald Trump just cut a $1 billion arms deal with the Saudi Arabia government. I mean, the Saudis have been, their ideology has been a challenge for Muslims around the world, and it doesn't seem that President Trump has been able to square the circle on that.
Yeah, Jack Rice, it does seem conspicuous that Donald Trump made great friends with the Saudis, mentioned nothing about Wahhabism, the extremist ideology that Osama bin Laden practiced, and that they have, a lot of people believe, exported around the world. He didn't have much to say about that.
No, you're absolutely right. The problem is ISIS has never been an existential threat. The only thing that gives them power is when the United States and the West goes after them and does things that are anti-Muslim, anti-Middle East, anti-race, all of the other issues that we've seen. It's the overreaction of the West that we have constantly seen. And you know what? There's another piece of this. The other side of the problem is the United States historically, not just with this president, but previously, we love supporting totalitarian dictators. Hence, a $110 billion deal with the Saudis, what we did with Mubarak in Egypt, what we did in Pakistan, what we've done in other parts of the world. We love to have strongmen who stomp down on their own people. That's all well and good from a stability standpoint for about 10 minutes, but the reaction, the impact over time is what we're seeing now. You're going to see those people push back. They push back against their own, but they push back against the West, and they push back against the United States because they know it's the United States who put them in power. It's the United States that's overthrown democratically supported governments in those regions, and we've put our own people in. So I think under those circumstances, it's frankly not a shock that some people are very angry. We need to recalibrate who we are, what we're doing, and remember what we stand for, not just use it as a bumper sticker.
Yeah, and of course, our closest ally, including in invading Iraq, was, of course, Great Britain, and they are feeling still, I think, a lot of the backlash from that. Rosa, I want to play you Mark Warner. He was the Democratic senator from Virginia. He was on CNN this morning talking about one of those reactions that you've seen, and that is the reassertion by the Trump administration that there should be a travel ban, and also Britain's reactions. Let's listen to Mark Warner.
There is no specific threat against the United States, but obviously we've seen our strongest ally, Britain, now hit 3 times. Our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to them. But I think what you're seeing in Britain is a resoluteness, but also a recognition that as the British, who went through 3 decades of IRA-related terrorism, they will carry on. And I think in many ways that's what we need to do here in our country as well.
You know, Rosa, what strikes me about that is that sounds the way that American presidents used to sound, but that is not the way Donald Trump responded to these attacks in London.
That's absolutely right. Donald Trump seems to be, if Donald Trump's goal was to increase the threat of terrorism in the United States, he couldn't be doing a better job. I think that between the inflammatory rhetoric.
I'm sorry, Rosa, I have to break in, and we're going to come back to you in just a second, but we want to go now to London, where authorities are giving an update on the investigation into last night's terrorist attack.
But there, of course, remains much more to do. We are making some